What's going on, everyone? So one of the more odd instances throughout Fromville that everyone kind of was like, well, how did that happen? And it seemed like we were never going to get an answer. And that was, how did Martin throw the rope down to Boyd, right? Boyd was stuck in that like chimney or whatever, right? In the dungeon. And Martin appeared to have thrown the rope that Boyd was able to climb and use to get up and out. And also, when he saw Martin was chained up. And it was like, what, was he just holding the rope in his hand the whole time? Did he have magical, mystical powers? Right? Like, how did Martin get Boyd the rope? But it was kind of something we all were just like, maybe it's just an error, an oversight, something that they didn't really put into mind. Well, we got the answer. And boy, did we get the answer. So, in the latest episode, episode 8, we see Julie take Ethan, by the way, which, why would you take your younger brother to a place that completely broke you mentally? I just want to start there, right? Like, Julie thought it was a great idea to take Ethan there. I know she probably was looking at it as like, like he can be the one to go get help, but then she grabs his hand and was going to go in together, right? However, only she was able to go in, and you find out that Julie is the one that actually threw the rope down to Boyd, which this confirms a theory that myself and many others have had, which is that time is not fluid, that it's not just a singular timeline, that time is all over the place in Fromville. It's what, we've talked theories about, like with Victor, right? There have been instances where it's like, okay, is this something from the past? Is this reincarnation? Is this whatever, right? Like, so now we know that time, there are different pockets, there are different dimensions, clearly, there are all kinds of different elements to time. So time is not what we know time to be in Fromville. It's completely different, right? Because again, Julie enters the ruins by herself, by the way, which I think is very interesting and a point that I want to touch on here in a moment. But Julie enters the ruins and finds herself in the dungeon. And then she is staring down 2 different moments in time. Technically 3, right? Because she sees herself along with Randall and Marielle, the 3 of them chained up, screaming, and she kind of like covering ears, breaking down for a moment. But then she sees the incident with Boyd and Martin, and she helps, like literally interacts. And we find out is the one that threw the rope down to Boyd, which is something we've always wanted to know. It's something we've always questioned, right? How did Boyd, like who gave Boyd the rope? It made no sense that it was Martin, unless it was just an error and oversight. Well, it turns out that it wasn't, right? Which is great in and of itself, because one of the things about like Lost, and look, this is still, I guess, a possibility. One of the things about Lost that a lot of people complain about is it felt like the show was figuring things out as it went along, right? Like it didn't really have a solution, where I feel like that clearly was a tie-in. Now, it is possible that they just were like, hey, a lot of people are asking about, the rope, right? Like maybe we should explain it, and maybe that's how it went. But so you had the Boyd rope, right? Which we see Julie directly interact with. But then we also get another, you don't get to see it, but you hear her mother, Tabitha, talking and screaming and yelling. That was from the time in which Tabitha and Victor were in the tunnels, right? When Tabitha fell through the hole that she was digging and Victor was waiting for her in the tunnels, right? That was that incident. And how do we know that? Because she sees into the cave, and we see the kind of entry point of the cave for that second layer where they were at, right? Where all the monsters were sleeping and the monsters were dwelling, where you had to go and like walk through, not just the entry, but you had to actually go through that other layer, right? So we actually see that entry point. I find this incredibly fascinating, because does this mean that you can change and manipulate things from the past, right? So again, the dungeon appears to be this sort of almost pocket dimension that not anyone can get to. Not everyone can just walk right into to the dungeon and see all these entry points. Also, Boyd, who entered the dungeon, he wasn't able to see all these different potential scenarios throughout the past. Only Julie was, right? Now, the reason I find this fascinating is because not anyone can just get into the ruins, as you saw with Ethan. Julie is holding Ethan's hand, and then Ethan gets left while Julie is there. It's clearly, it's not the body that's entering, it's like the spirit or the essence, whatever, right? Like it's not, it can't be, because I saw people in the live stream, we're talking about the mind. Oh, it's all in the mind. I don't think it's the mind. Again, obviously we don't know for certain, but I don't believe it's the mind, because we see Julie directly interact. We've seen Boyd actually be able to physically touch and move and help, Martin and Julie and all of them and break the music. But I think it's like their spirit gets trapped. Their spirit gets lost in this place, and that's kind of like your essence goes there, whichever, right? Like, and I think it begs the question now of, is that dungeon a entry point to manipulate time potentially, right? Because again, we saw her help Boyd with the rope. She directly was responsible and impacted that moment. She was the reason Boyd wasn't stuck in that, chimney or whatever forever. Right? She's the one that was able to go and throw the rope down to save him. So, for instance, let's say her mom dies, right? Let's say Tabitha goes into the tunnels and the monsters eat her, right? Just argument's sake, right? Does that mean that Julie can now go into the dungeon, right? Go to the ruins, go into the dungeon, and maybe now go to that point and grab her mother out of the tunnels before the monsters come to go eat her, right? Like, what's the limitation for this dungeon? Right? This goes into like, answer one question, have 50 more, because now there's 50 more questions with this dungeon. And again, it's an entry point that not everyone can get to. We've seen a lot of people at those ruins. Again, Kenny, Sarah, Boyd, right? Boyd wasn't even able to get in until he went and got the torch. Remember, he had to go grab the torch, light the torch, and then was able to enter the dungeon. He was not like, so just like the faraway trees, for example, right? We've seen when Julie, for example, she goes in the tree, she ends up in the, that little cellar, and is able to escape. Victor, we know he's gone through them. Obviously, Tabitha, right? Like Boyd, right? We've seen several characters that are important, are significant, characters that matter, that have a journey and a purpose. Those characters are able to enter those trees without ill results. However, we saw like with Dale, when he thought he was somebody important, he thought he was a hero, he thought he was a big shot. What did he do? He went into the tree and ended up being embedded into the pool, right? So the ruins to me kind of feel very similar. You have these like portals, you have these sort of different dimensions and things that allow you, if you're sort of one of the selected few, to enter this space, right? Like Boyd, he was at that moment important. He was selected, right? Like that's why he ended up there. The tree, what did Victor say? The tree takes you where you need to go, right? Boyd at the time needed to go to that dungeon, and then he needed to get the torch, and then he needed to eventually be able to get back there in order to save Julie, Marielle, and Randall. So also, this leads you to believe that both Marielle as well as Randall can both enter that dungeon, right? So could that be something that, like, could Randall go back to before he was attacked? Right? Like, can you change and manipulate things? Because look, if Julie was able to enter that place without a torch or anything like that, was just able to just walk in freely, that has to mean that Randall and Marielle could do the same. And also to kind of further that point, Randall felt the exact same thing. Randall felt everything that Julie felt, right? But he just wanted to stay away because he was like, what happens if it makes it worse? But Julie's curiosity, which is something I talked about, I was like, Randall's gonna be the one to stay away just because Randall, he's older, he's more mature. He's not gonna let his curiosity put him in that headspace again, where Julie, her innocence, her lack of experience, her curiosity was gonna, curiosity killed the cat type thing. It's kind of what it felt like with Julie. So I felt like she was gonna get there. So I'm curious to see if Julie relays this to Randall and maybe even Marielle, and that is kind of an exploratory point the last 2 episodes, and maybe even into next season, right? Is that dungeon, those ruins, is that a way to maybe potentially navigate time? Is Julie going to be able to navigate time and be able to get to different points, and maybe she can, again, directly impact and interact with certain elements in past periods throughout the series, right? Like, I don't know, maybe she could, like I said, save lives or whatever, or change an outcome, something like that could be very interesting. She's like the time wizard. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? What did you make of this episode? What did you make of what's going on with Julie and everything? Do you find it fascinating? Do you think that she may be able to manipulate time and change things? Do you think it won't be able to go that far? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. It's me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.